A Child is Born, A Beginner's Guide to Nativity Stories by Amy Jill Levine. Chapter 1. The Conception and Birth of Isaac and Ishmael. The people Genesis depicts are not designed to be role models. To the contrary, we should struggle with our assessment of them. What would we do if we were in their sandals? With whom should our loyalties lie? Natal family or nation? Spouse? Children? God? Ourselves? Can we, even admire a person and still recognize that person's flaws? The answers are neither clear nor easy, but conversation around such questions has the potential to give us new insights into our own place in the world, our neighbors, and the God into whom the Bible offers glimpses. Promises. The story of Abraham, his wives, and his children runs primarily from Genesis 11:26 to Genesis 21:43. It is then picked up in numerous places throughout both Old Testament and New. Prior to Abraham's introduction, the Bible gives what might be called primeval history, the creation of the world, with everyone in the divine image and likeness, the creation of Adam from dirt and Eve from bone, their disobedience regarding the forbidden fruit, and their descent/ascent into civilization. The first murder, when Cain kills Abel, which shows that to kill one person is to kill 1/4 of the world's population. The relationship between the sons of God, or in later tradition, fallen angels, and human women that produces the evils of the generation of the flood. Noah's Ark, the post-Diluvian mistakes of Noah and his family, and the Tower of Babel. From that glorious creation narrative in Genesis 1 and the harmony of all of creation in Genesis 2, it's been tough going. Many of these themes repeat. The wife Eve, who calls the husband Adam what to do, even if that action creates problems. Rival brothers, angels involved with conception and birth, imperfect families, dispersion from one's home to a new location. Each thematic repetition sends us back to the original, where we may see something new. Or, recognizing the repetition, we can ask ourselves if the second iteration or the third is an improvement or a regression. And, in each repetition, we may find something of our own story. In Genesis chapter 12, Abraham provides the chance for God and the readers to restart following the mess of the Tower of Babel. God has scattered the people from Babel, i.e. Babylon, the later place of exile, over the face of all the earth. Genesis chapter 11, verse 8. From this geographical diversity, ironically fulfilling the Bible's first commandment, Genesis 1:28, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, God zeroes in on one person. The Bible frequently moves from the universal, example, all Egypt, to the particular, example, 2 midwives, Pharaoh's daughter, and in doing so shows that one person's actions can have repercussions for all. Naming. Abraham himself gets a do-over. Abram, as he is introduced, starts over with a new identity and a new name. God, establishing a covenant, tells him, "No longer shall your name be Abram." The Hebrew means something like exalted, ram, another ancestor or father, Ab. "But your name shall be Abraham." Ab, as in still, ancestor or father. Raham suggests a multitude. "For I have made you the ancestor of a multitude of nations." Genesis chapter 17, verse 5. For our purposes, we'll call him Abraham throughout. Language nerds find here a connection to Jesus, who refers to God as Abba. Mark 14:36, also Romans 8:15, Galatians 4:6. From that same Ab root in both Hebrew and Aramaic. Fathers take various forms. Heavenly, biological, adoptive, religious, as in the ecclesial title, political, father of the country, a male dissertation advisor, as in doctorvater. Abraham is not an ideal father. No figure in the Old Testament is. The text is not inclined to deify its figures, but to depict them as flawed beings from whom we can learn, with whom we can empathize, or against whom we can rail. But he already raises questions of what we want in a father, and how fathers want to act and to be remembered. Abraham's wife also experiences changes. She is named Sarai, which likely comes from the Hebrew root meaning to rule. As part of the covenant, God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name." Genesis 17:15. The new name means princess. Although I like the name Sarah, our daughter, was named after my father Saul, I was not initially thrilled with its etymology. For a little girl to be called princess is one thing. For a 90-year-old woman, it strikes me as infantilizing. That is, until I read this story in light of the Moses story, and I realize that the first princess we meet is Pharaoh's daughter, the one who rescues Moses. So I wonder, did Pharaoh's daughter have children of her own? Was she like Sarah? Our Sarah in Genesis plans to provide Abraham an heir by having Abraham conceive a child with her enslaved Egyptian Hagar. Did Pharaoh's daughter provide herself a child by taking a son away from the enslaved Hebrew woman Jochebed? Leaving home. God tells Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Abraham obeys and thus becomes, like Adam and Eve, expelled east of Eden, and Cain expelled east of Eden, trying to find a home away from home. Like Moses and many others, Abraham becomes another stranger in a strange land. Exodus chapter 2, verse 22, and then 18, verse 3. The irony here is that when God issued the command, Abraham had already left his land. Back in Genesis 11:31, we learn that Terah took his son Abraham, as well as his grandson, Abraham's nephew Lot, and Sarah, the daughter-in-law from Ur of the Chaldees, to go to Canaan. But they stopped at the city of Haran. There Terah dies. Abraham is introduced in mid-journey, already removed from his place of birth, but not yet at the place his father sought to go. I'm reminded of Moses, who leaves Egypt, but never himself enters the promised land. I'm reminded of Samson, blinded and brought in bronze shackles down to Gaza. Yes, that Gaza, where he will die in the temple of the Philistine god. And I'm reminded of the nativity stories. In Matthew 2, Joseph brings his father from Bethlehem in Judea to Egypt for refuge, and then returns from Egypt not to Judea, but to a small town in the Galilee called Nazareth. In Luke's account, Joseph and Mary go back and forth between Nazareth and Galilee and Judea, from Nazareth to Bethlehem, to be registered for the census, then to Jerusalem to present Jesus at the temple, then back to Jerusalem for pilgrimage festivals. The biblical story is one of displacement, of refugees and migrants, people uprooted by famine, and people uprooted by empires. It is also a story of pilgrimage, of making connections with relatives who live in different locations, and of exploration. It is a story of people trying to find and to make a home. Abraham's story, and so Jesus' story, asks us how we understand home. Do we live where we were born? And if so, are we where we want to be? Did we set out for adventure or for a job? Did we follow a loved one, or did that loved one follow us? Were we moved against our will? Did we move in order to make life better for ourselves and our families? Or were we forced to move by war, economics, bigotry? Are we where we want to be, or where we think we should be? All this and more from one verse. In the next two verses, God promises Abraham that he will make from him a great nation. Not only will God bless Abraham, God will bless those who bless Abraham, so that in him all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Thus this call, while it settles on one family, rather than all of humanity, opens up to all humanity. The Old Testament is not just about one family or one nation, it is about how one person, one family, or one nation takes its place in the global setting. To be a great nation requires others. One cannot be a great nation on one's own, no matter how high the ego. But Abraham is already a senior citizen, as is his wife Sarah, and so far, no children. Genesis 11:30, after introducing Sarah, makes the point she was barren, she had no child. This introduction bothers me. Yes, Sarah's infertility is necessary to the plot, but surely there is more to say about her. Then again, biblical mentions of infertile couples are as good as a positive pregnancy test. But Sarah must wait. The family arrives in Canaan, the promised land, in Genesis 12:5. In Genesis 12:10, we learn of a local famine. So our protagonists hit the road again. Abraham takes Sarah and decamps to Egypt, which, because it relies on the annual flooding of the Nile rather than on rainfall, functions as the local breadbasket. In 3 generations, the first Joseph, the son of Jacob, again relocates his family to Egypt when another famine hits Canaan. That is how generations later Moses happened to be born in Egypt. In Egypt, Abraham speaks his first words to Sarah. I know well that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. Genesis chapter 12, verse 11. This is not necessarily an auspicious start. If this is the first thing I hear in the morning, I fear the next comment is going to be a request to pick up the dry cleaning. Abraham then explains his fear that Pharaoh, another one, also unnamed, will have him killed and claim Sarah for his own. Therefore, she should pretend she is his sister so that it may go well with him because of you and that my life may be spared on your account. Genesis 12, verse 13. Sarah complies. The Egyptians remark on her beauty, praise her to Pharaoh, who then, on cue, takes Sarah into his household. The goal was not to play canasta. Pharaoh rewards Abraham with gifts, including enslaved females, perhaps explaining how Hagar entered the household. A plague ensues, foreshadowing the Exodus story. Pharaoh, realizing that Sarah is the cause, evicts her and Abraham from Egypt. Likely Hagar accompanied them.